Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I'm here with Pretty Pink Posh as part of Rainbow Theme Week. All this week we've been sharing rainbow themed projects, and today I have one featuring Pretty Pink Posh dies and sequins and this fun rainbow themed card. I'm also going to be sharing some Copic coloring and distress ink techniques that I used to be able to create this card. So let's get started and check it out. For my project, I'm going to be using this cool cat stamp set from My Favorite Things, and I'm also going to be using the Stitch Speech Bubbles, which are dies from Pretty Pink Posh. This is a set of 3 different speech bubble dies. I just love the fun stitching detail in these dies. We're going to be using the 2 that I'm holding in my hand. However, first I want to go ahead and start by stamping my critters onto some cardstock. So here I've got some Nina Solar White cardstock, and I'm going to be taking my Simon Says Stamp Intense Black dye ink to go ahead and stamp these little cuties down onto this cardstock. I'm inking them up, and then I'm going to go ahead and press them down onto my paper. I'm using the Misty Stamping Tool, which is a stamp positioner, to go ahead and help me press those down onto the paper. I'm going to re-ink these little stamps and stamp them once again. The Misty Stamping Tool allows me to do that because it stamps perfectly in the exact same place every time. And this is going to help me get a much darker impression. So I've stamped that down a second time, and then I'll go ahead and clean off my stamps and start my Copic coloring. For this cat, I'm going to be using some cool grays, and I'm going to be adding some texture to him or her using some flicking motions. This is kind of creating the look of a furry looking cat because this one reminds me of one of those little puffy white cats that just are so cute. So I'm going to go ahead and color this with some very light gray markers, and this is going to allow my cat to have some depth and dimension and look white with a little bit of shading, because of course a white image would not be totally flat white. It would have dimension in some darker areas. So adding those darker areas using my light gray markers helps me achieve that white look with dimension. I added a little bit of blush to his cheeks, and then I'm going to go ahead and start coloring the second cat. This one I'm going to be coloring black. So I'm going to start with a light color of gray, and then I'm going to go progressively darker. So I'm adding some darker colors around the outside edges, and then I'm blending towards the center. This is going to help give my cat a lot more dimension and have it feel a little bit more rounded. I'm going to add some color to the tops of his ears and also to his paws, but I'm not doing a lot of shading on there because they're very small areas. I'm also going to add blush to this little cat as well, and I've also added some pink to his ears. For the final cat, I'm going to go ahead and color that one with some both light grays and dark grays. I'm going to give his stripes some darker color, and the body of him will be a whitish color. So I'm going to go ahead and add my lighter grays for the body, and I'll go ahead and add some shading along the outside edges. I'm not worried too much about a light source for these animals. I'm letting the light come from the front and center as if the light was facing in front of these little guys. So it's going to allow me to have some darker color all the way around the image, and then have the centermost portions of these images the lightest color. And this is really simple and easy coloring to be able to replicate. So I'll go ahead and add some darker color to the little stripes, and then I'll go ahead and blend that out with my lighter colors. I'm also going to add a little bit of blush to the cheeks of this one as well, and also to his ears. Now once I finished all my coloring, I'm going to go ahead and trim them out, and now I'm going to cut them out using my Cutter Bee scissors. I'm going to fussy cut all of these little guys out, but you could cut them with the coordinating dies. There are dies that go with this stamp set, but they're available separately. Alright, so now to move on to my speech bubbles. I'm die cutting these from some white watercolor paper. This is Strathmore Bristol Smooth paper. I'm going to go ahead and die cut a whole bunch of them, but you can see here how they create gorgeous little stitching details around the outside edges, and I die cut a total of 6 of them. Here I've got some Festive Berries distress ink. I'm going to go ahead and start blending this onto my little speech bubbles. I'm adding a little bit slightly darker shading around the outside edges of the speech bubbles. It's not super noticeable, but it does add just a little bit extra depth to these speech bubbles, which I really like. I've added that ink, and now I'm going to go ahead and spritz this with my distress sprayer to give it some water droplets. I'm being very generous with these to go ahead and give them some really fun and organic splatters, letting the water go wherever it wants. For the orange color, I'm using Right Persimmon. I just love this orange. It is so beautiful. Again, I'm coloring these in the exact same way that I did the first one. I'm adding the darker color along the outside edges, and then I'm going to go ahead and spritz them with water. And I've repeated this for all of the speech bubbles that I'm using in this card. So here I've got some mustard seed for the yellow. I'll go ahead and blend that on. For the green, I'm going to be using some Twisted Citron Distress ink, and I'll go ahead and add that to this little speech bubble. I've randomly die cut a bunch of different speech bubbles from the 2 dies that I showed you previously. Here I've got some Salty Ocean, and I'm adding that onto that speech bubble, and then I'm going to go ahead and use Wilted Violet for the last one. So here are all my speech bubbles completely covered with Distress ink and all in a gorgeous rainbow color palette. I just love how happy and bright and fun that these are. These are really, really cool. Alright, so now I wanted to add some sentiments. So I'm taking my vellum here and a powder tool, and I'm prepping this so that way there's no leftover static on this vellum. I've got a few of the sentiments that are included in the Cool Cat stamp set. I'm going to ink them up with some Simon Says Stamp clear embossing ink. This is new ink from Simon Says Stamp, and I absolutely love it. I actually use this now rather than my Versamark ink. I love it that much. So I'll go ahead and heat emboss those with some white embossing powder, and then I'll go ahead and trim them out using my scissors. I cut these out very simply. I'm just going around the edges of the words, and then I'll go ahead and do some straight lines all the way across. And this just lets me achieve a little bit of dimension with these sentiments. Alright, so now I'm going to start putting everything together. You can see I've got it already pre-laid out, and I did end up taking a picture with my phone so that way I could make sure that I keep everything where I wanted it. Because I wanted to make sure that this layout stayed the same. So here you can see I'm bringing my phone up to the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and snap a picture so that way I can keep track of how I was originally planning this to be laid out. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring in my foam tape, and I'm going to start popping these little speech bubbles up. I'm going to be creating multiple layers of these speech bubbles. So for the backmost speech bubbles, I'm popping them up on one piece of foam tape. And then for the second layer of speech bubbles, I'm going to start popping them up with 2 layers of foam tape. So this is going to help me achieve a lot more extra dimension to this card and help it have a little bit more of a fun look. This extra dimension really gives this card a great bit of interest and really leads your eye to where you need to go to read the sentiments. Alright, so I'm going to keep putting all of this together, and I'm just going to keep adding foam tape to the back sides of my speech bubbles and also my critters. And then I'll go ahead and add my sentiments down using some regular adhesive. I've just put some ATG adhesive on the back side of the vellum, and I'm popping them up onto the speech bubbles that I plan them to be on. So here you can see the sentiment reads, "Happy Birthday from Meow to you, your one cool cat." Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and add some shading to the ground for this card because my critters needed to be grounded onto something. I couldn't have them floating in midair. That would look kind of silly. So here I'm taking some of my gray markers, and I'm going to start adding some shading along the bottom portion. This is just going to help give those critters someplace to stand on, and that gray color really matches nicely with the coloring on the cats. At the last minute, I decided to add a couple of the little elements that are included in the stamp set, the little fishbowl and the flower pot. I felt the card needed something on those top speech bubbles, so popping them up really helped finish that off. And now I'm going to take some Pretty Pink Posh Sparkling Clear sequins. These are the Sparkling Clear sequin mix, and I'm just adding these around onto my speech bubbles. And that's going to do it. I hope you've enjoyed and got some inspiration on using your Distress inks and Copic markers to create some gorgeous rainbow-themed projects. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments section below, and head on over to the Pretty Pink Posh blog where you can get more information on this card, including still pictures and products used. If you enjoyed this video, here's another one you might like featuring Pretty Pink Posh products. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.